There, not a lot of hope. I know one of your other projects. Another area where we have worked hard these last few years for global understanding is the climate change area, and that's at least with the re-election of President Obama, the fact that we actually have made some substantial gains in carbon reduction due to the slow growth of the economy in part, also in part to the abundant natural gas findings and the price reporting, and finally for major regulatory actions taken in the United States and China don't often get noticed, but we have actually cut carbon emissions in the United States 9% in the last 5 years. So the question is are there some prospects for some progress on that front in the years immediately ahead?
I mean, first of all, by the way, in energy terms, what you're talking about, shale particularly, that's a game changer for the whole American economy, and I think it's got massive implications for geopolitics. I agree. And there are also, by the way, substantial reserves of shale in China as well, which is going to make a difference. I think on the climate issue, look, it remains incredibly important. I mean, I find it completely absurd when people say, well, as a result of the economic downturn, we should not care about the climate issue. If it's right to care about it, you should be caring about it irrespective of the state of the economy, because long-term the damage that's going to be done to the environment. And look, there's still a residual scientific debate about climate change, but even on a basic precautionary principle, there is sufficient scientific weight and evidence behind the fact that there is a serious problem for us to deal with it. So we should. The difference, I think, in the approach that I would take is that I think trying to get this agreement done between all the countries of the world in this process that's going on in Doha and Qatar at the moment, I think it's terrible. Personally, I would take the obligations countries have entered into already, I'd put them together, I would get the thing moving, and really look at how you incentivize the development of the science and technology in these areas, because that is the only way ultimately you're going to resolve this. I mean, as I say, I was in China yesterday. China's economy is going to carry on growing. They've still got to lift hundreds of millions of people from subsistence farming into industrialized economy. They're going to carry on consuming. So we either find ways of doing it sustainably, or we've got a big problem. And that's where I would put the emphasis. And yes, I think the re-election of President Obama here gives us an opportunity, but frankly, he needs the cooperation of the Europeans, the Chinese, the Indians, and the emerging market economies.
Well, again, I think this meeting in Doha is going to lead nowhere. I don't see any possibility of any breakthrough. I am afraid that some of the premises on which we have been working all these years will continue to lead us nowhere. As long as we don't recognize that measures have to be more aggressive in terms of pricing carbon, we are not going to have really significant progress. There the controversy comes because there are basically two schools of thought. One was the winning side some years ago with this cap and trade approach, and the other people who believe, that direct pricing will be the way to go. Some people predicted that the cap and trade will fail simply because you converted the problem into a zero someday. Your emissions are not my emissions, and vice versa. So that has really no geopolitical solution. So some of us said, no, the commitment should have been about pricing carbon, and not even sharing the revenues of the carbon pricing. Because if you move into that and try to make an international transfer mechanism, it again will be geopolitically extremely complicated. You mentioned the case of the United States. I mean, and I think the most important factor has been that the price of oil has been consistently high now for almost 8 years. And that has induced changes in economic behavior. And by the way, that caused this boom in shale gas. I mean, we have known of shale gas for many years. We have known the technology, which is not a big deal, but the price was not right to do it. Now it's right, and we are seeing this energy revolution in the United States. So if we only took this experience to apply the very elementary simples and put that into an international agreement that has to be fundamentally different from the Kyoto Protocol, then there will be some progress. But if we continue to patch and to make a list of good wishes and goodwill, and I don't think we are going to go nowhere. And this is a disaster because this is happening and will continue to happen. And we will regret it, while my children and my grandchildren will regret that we were so incompetent for not having done something similar.
So when we had a conversation like this 4 years ago, exactly this week, right after President Obama had been elected to his first term in office. The question I asked you to close that session was, what advice do you have for President Obama as he enters his first term? So let me ask the question, what advice would both of you have for President Obama entering his second term? What would you do if you were?
I think I remember saying that I wouldn't presume to give him advice.
I know, I'm not letting you off the hook this time.
I think...
Actually, by the way, you said that and then proceeded to.
That's good, I'm a politician. I think the single most important thing right now is that actually the world at the present time needs America's leadership. The world is it is going to develop in a multipolar way today, so it requires a different type of leadership. But I think whether on the global economy, on the issue of climate, or international security, my view is that the single most important thing that people from the outside want to see about America is to recover its economic strength, to stand up for values that we believe in and hold dear, because they're basically good values that most of the world shares. And one other thing that I think is really, really important, the thing that I have learned, seeing different people in different parts of the world, is that ultimately, here is the good news amongst all the good. Wherever you go, what most people want is the same. They want to be able to bring up their family with a certain amount of security, to have their children do better than they did, or at least have the opportunity of doing so, and to live in a society where the government is underneath you rather than on top of you. Right? That is what most people in the world want wherever you go. And at its best, not always, it doesn't always done it, but at its best, that is actually what America represents. And the world needs American leadership. You should be proud of the leadership you give. You will be criticized for it. I always say this to people in America: give up on being loved. That's not your role in life, okay? Your role in life is to represent what at your best you can be and give that leadership to the world, because the world is better off for it.
Very good advice.
Well, I never give advice. Express good wishes, and I wish that President Obama works hard on the economic issues. I think this country has incredible potential because of all its flexibilities, its relatively young population, its natural resources. And if the U.S. economy does well,
and it's superior universities too, right?
Yeah, but I don't want to inflate your ego too much. But anyways, I think that if the U.S. economy does well in a sustained manner, I think that will mean a lot for the global economy, certainly for my own country. We are not so interdependent, fortunately, with the United States, so we need the U.S. to do well. Others need the U.S. to do well. But as the Prime Minister said, the U.S. has to have leadership. But you don't get leadership by saying nice things. You get leadership by doing the right things. And I think a first big test of this new stage for President Obama is how this fiscal cliff, which actually is a much broader topic. I mean, this is really defining how the United States is going to adapt, adjust itself to a particular period over the last decade, but more importantly, looking forward. In my view, as a former politician, I think right now he has a great opportunity, but he has to have a plan, a very comprehensive plan, and he has to be willing to swallow a lot of discomfort within the next few weeks and months. I remember when I was in office, President Clinton had this difference with Mr. Gingrich, and he allowed the government to be shut down. It was terrible, horrible for a few days, but eventually, he did extremely well, and he even became very popular again. So I think President Obama, this is his moment. And I don't think he should accept just some mending things to kick the can down the road. This is the moment of truth to give this country a viable, sustainable program to recover its economic vigor. And he can do it.
I think he's absolutely right. I think President Obama's got the will and determination to do that. Just before we end, by the way, I'll tell you one great story about President Zedillo, which I remember him telling me, which is that when he was in office, he knew he was doing the right thing, because he was having to take some very unpopular decisions. He knew he was doing the right thing when his opinion poll rating fell below the rate of inflation.
Absolutely.
That's it. It's a great test to apply.
Let's hope we don't have to go that far in the low inflation regime. Thank you both very much.